We're back with the Texas RV professor, Terry Cooper. I'm Dave Dufour, and we're talking about making ready to go on the road, but not going on the road until you've done a little bit of inspecting of the RV. We're talking about windows and doors and windows at this point. We talked about sidewalls and looking for, boy, that delamination was kind of a nasty animal, but that can also happen in and around the doors and windows, can it?
That's where really a lot of damage is you see a lot around the windows and doors. But yet, a lot of times we as RVers can do that repair ourselves. And that's kind of what I'd like to visit with you guys a little bit. Because I had some folks bring that question up this last weekend when I was taking care of an RV show. One guy came up and said he had some delamination around a window and wanted to know what could he do, or was he going to have to go in there and cut it completely out. And as we talked about it, what he explained to me is that evidently their caulking job had failed and water had gotten in behind those windows. And like I told him, I said, just need to take those windows out. And because there's usually a clamp ring with some screws holding it. That way it comes apart, the ring stays inside the coach, and the window comes out. And then you open that panel up, and that's where you have to have a good putty knife, and you start opening those panels up and finding where that delamination's taking place with those panels. And man, you better have you some glue, because you're fixing to do some serious gluing up. And I like to have a little paint stir, you know, the little paddle stick.
Yeah.
You open those panels up, and you can spread them open, and then you start squirting that glue in there, and you start running it down there with those paddle sticks.
Gotcha.
And get it to go down in there, because what you're trying to do is reestablish that adhesion between those layers.
Okay.
Once you get it down in there, then you start finding you some clamps, some C-clamps and things. Start pulling those panels back together again and put them under pressure and hold them up there. And then I like to leave them set for at least 24, sometimes 48 hours and let those panels bond. You'd be surprised how you can save those panels like that, but just a little bit of work, a little bit of time, a little bit of patience.
And is that sort of the same issue around the doors as well, that you can pull the door out if you need to and do the same kind of job?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, you know, it's like everything else. You have to look at them on a case-by-case basis. But what I see is a lot of the damage around those doors and windows. You can fix it just by taking the time and not getting in a hurry, being very meticulous about it. Because when you start looking at when these insurance companies come in and they start looking at these RVs, and you know that adjuster is looking at it from the standpoint, okay, how bad's the damage? What's the value of this RV? And you start getting around 65, 70%, and they're liable to total that thing on you. And if you owe any money on it, sometimes you might end up being upside down.
That's
and
right.
then you still, you know, the coach is gone, but you still owe money on it.
Right, and that's a big money loser that probably a lot of people don't think about. You know,
They don't.
The cost of maintaining is pretty good insurance against the insurance adjuster.
And you know, when you do that kind of maintenance and service, you're actually you're taking care of your investment.
Yeah.
You really are.
Sure.
And so someday you're going to want to buy another rig, because, you know, like we've talked about on previous segments, that if a couple buys an RV and they enjoy it, they'll buy 7 in their lifetime. Well, at one point or another, you're going to want to sell the one you have before you buy a new one. So why turn in a junker when you've got something that you could turn in and get a real good trade-in on, or maybe sell it outright and make some money off of it?
Well, let's look at the visual inspection aspect of this, though. I mean, if obviously you don't find out about these problems unless you look. When it comes to doors, what do we look at? What do we check first?
Well, doors are kind of tricky because there's two places that they have a tendency to leak. The first one, of course, is around the outer ring, where they actually set up against the sidewall. And here again, it's usually short people or people standing on the ground, and that RV's, you know, quite a bit taller than them. They don't get a ladder, and they don't seal on top of the door and around the areas where the water rolls off the roof down the sidewall, and then it goes right behind that door and into the sidewall and delaminates things. The other area we see damage is in most of the doors will have a window. It's you know, sometimes to see out of, but sometimes to let light in. But there's usually a plastic or rubber seal around that glass where it bonds up against the door itself.
Right.
Well, through a period of time, the sun beats down, causes that plastic or that rubber to dry out, and so all of a sudden now we have another place where water can get in. And so sealing it with a good silicone or a good lap sealant that's non-leveling will seal that and keep that water out, because I've seen doors that were delaminating because water had gotten in around the windows, and there's no sense in that, because we can take care of it ourselves.
Okay. And what about the Windows end of it then?
Well, usually you'll look at these windows and you can pretty well tell if they're holding. We'll have a lot of windows out there, what we call double pane, and they'll be clouded up, and that tells you that they're not holding their seal. So that might be something you have to make the determination whether or not you have it changed out. But here again, the sealant around that window on top, on the sides, it's just like around a door.
Mm-hmm.
You want to look at the frame, see if you've got anything breaking loose, screws have come out. And it's just all simple little visual observations. Just spend a little bit of time running your hand over it, pushing and poking on things, and up close, you'll be surprised what you'll find and things that you can take care of and extend the life of this RV.
Right. Now, one of the things you mentioned the possibility that if you have enough damage or a problem that it may lead to the possibility of having to change the window out. Now, is that something that most RVers can do themselves? I understand, if I forgive or correct me if I'm wrong, but changing out a window in an RV is not the same kind of daunting task it is if you're trying to change a picture window on your house.
Not at all.
Uh-huh.
Not at all. It just takes a little investigation, and you can come on site and look at it. There's places on the internet that'll show you how to change them out. A lot of the manufacturers of these replacement windows, they'll have instructions, and just depending on the type of window and how it's installed, you just make that determination. Some of them have screws that screw around the outside of the window, screw into the wall.
Mm-hmm.
Others of them have what we call a squeeze ring, and basically it's the window on the outside, a ring on the inside, and then you run screws in between them, and it clamps it together.
Gotcha.
And really, many times what will happen is you start taking that clamp ring out of there, that squeeze ring out, and then you just take your credit card putty knife that we've talked about so many times before, and you run around the outside of that edge of that window, between the sidewall and that window, and break that sealant loose and have somebody catch that window. She starts to come out.
Okay. Great. Okay. Well, we're going to be back with more, more specifically your questions for the Texas RV Professor when Ask the Professor comes back in just a minute. The Texas RV Professor wants to hear from you. Email your questions or comments to professor@rvnn.tv. If you have a specific problem, it really helps if you can send a photo as well. That makes it easier for Terry to diagnose your issue. You can also leave a voicemail for Terry Cooper at 877-578-RVNN, extension 708. Follow RV Newsnet on Facebook and Twitter, and you can receive text messages to alert you when we're streaming live by texting RVNN to 72727. That way, you can join us live in the chat room, ask questions, and become part of the RV Newsnet family. Remember, any photos or other material submitted to us become the property of RV Newsnet and cannot be returned. Today's show is brought to you by Angie's List, where you'll find thousands of unbiased reports and reviews about service companies in your area. Whether you're looking for a roofer, plumber, house cleaner, dentist, or even a doctor, Angie's List members share their experiences with each other so that you can choose the service company that's right for your job. Companies can't pay to be on Angie's List, and the reviews come from people just like you who have had experience with the companies mentioned. To find out more, go to rvnn.tv and click on the Angie's List ad.